Hey, it's Mike from Backyard Boatworks, and so tonight's project is to coat the interior of the hull with at least one coat of epoxy. We need two coats of epoxy on it, but it is a pretty tedious job. Basically, I end up just pouring a little of the mixed epoxy. I've got a short little roller that works pretty well, and so I will spread that out and also then coat the roller, and then I can also then transfer that up to areas that need to be rolled. As you can see, that kind of works pretty good for getting in there. The problem is it does not, it leaves little gaps like in there. So for that, I use my little foam brush and dip that into the epoxy, and then come back and touch that up, and then try to touch up underneath the area here in any spot that the roller misses. So, as you know how the saying goes, it's like watching paint dry. So it's not a real fun project, but it's got to get done. So I've basically coated the interior of the boat with a coat of epoxy, and I still have, in fact, what I'm working on right now is filling in the little holes on my rail, because we want to make sure everything is coated and waterproof, and then eventually we will also varnish everything over the top of this to keep the epoxy from going bad. But yeah, it's a lot of work. It's kind of boring video, so I haven't done a lot of it, but you can kind of see the end result. That's one coat, my two assistants here. So anyway, I'm going to continue the tedious task of putting epoxy into all the little holes all the way around the rail, and then I'm going to call it a night. Inside the little areas there, I don't know if you can see it. So you can see how that one has been done. This one is still dry, and so I'm using the West Systems little glue brushes. They seem to be about perfect, and so anyway, just stick a little epoxy on it and carefully try to get some epoxy in there without creating a run. Okay, on to the next one. I don't know, I've got a couple hundred more to go. Again, this is kind of boring video, so that's why I've kind of kept the camera off here while I've been trying to do this portion of it, but I do want to at least let you know kind of where we're at in the process. So I will continue. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye. Well, the epoxy has all set up. I wiped it all down with some warm water and a scrubby to remove any ambient blush that might be on the epoxy. So the weather this week is supposed to be nice, so I'm going to see if I can't drag the boat outside to do the sanding on it, try to eliminate some of the sanding dust in here, and then we can put a second coat of epoxy on it. So this is going to be fun. See you outside. So I've been sanding on this for a week now. It's not perfect. It's a long way from perfect, but I'm to my limit. I've concentrated more on the areas above where the floorboards are going to be, and it looks pretty good. At some point you can work on it forever to get it down to perfection, but it's not furniture. It's a sailboat. It's going to get scratched if you're going to use it. So at some point you got to say it's good enough, and I'm to that point. So at this point I'm going to do a good cleanup, and then I'll coat it again with another coat of epoxy, and then I'll be sanding that down, but that'll be a light sanding with 220, and then we'll start the varnishing process. So that's where we're at. So the weather has taken a turn for the worst. It's cold and rainy out there. So I've brought the boat back into the garage. We flipped it over, and my next two projects, I'm going to try to cut this slot for the centerboard, and then hopefully I can get the sceg installed. So that's what I'm going to work on this weekend. So let's see how it goes. So I've got a couple of pilot holes that I drilled, and now I'm going to enlarge them to 1/2 inch. And so now we're going to connect 2 holes. Especially if I plug it in, it might work better. Okay, so I'm going to use a router with a flush cut bit to enlarge or open up the slot for the centerboard. It's got a little bearing that just kind of rides along the edge of the wall, and then it just cuts flush to that. Okay, well, that didn't go quite as smooth as I'd hoped. There was some epoxy gooped in there that when you tried the flush cut bit hits it, it kind of bounced over, so it kind of leaves a little notch. So I'm going to have to get in there with some sandpaper, but that's not a big deal. So I'm going to smooth that up with some sandpaper, and then I'm going to run a 1/4 router curve around, or I'm going to run a 1/4 radius router around the outer edge of this. So anyway, that'll be the next thing. There's a big gob of epoxy that just came out from the squeeze out when I put the centerboard in, right there. So today's project is to install the sceg, and it's going to go here. I'm going to take it out to the shop and router the edges here in a bit. But right now what I want to do, there's 3 screws that hold it in, so I need to drill some pilot holes. I've measured where they're going to go. There's one. So then I'll be able to climb underneath and find where those pilot holes are, And then at some point, after I router this, then I will have somebody hold this in place while I drill up from underneath into here. So I'm trying to line up the sceg onto the hull, and what I found is a little ratchet strap. Seemed to work pretty well. Yeah, I think that's going to work. So now I'm going to pre-drill the pilot holes up for these screws that are going to hold the sceg into the hull. So there we go. So I'm going to drill a hole for the countersink for the holding the sceg on, and I've pre-drilled the little pilot hole so I know exactly where it's at. The sceg should be all lined up. If I can make this about as square as I can. So I'm going to temporarily put the screw in to kind of hold it till I can drill the other pilot holes. Oh, come on, battery, don't die on me. So I've got it all ready to install the sceg. We've pre-drilled and pre-installed it and put the screws in and stuff, so I know it fits. So now I'm going to goop it up with some epoxy and fibers, and we'll install it permanently. So I've got the sceg coated with the epoxy mixture. There goes my dog's barking. Okay. Now I'm going to climb underneath and see if I can start a couple of screws back up into that. Okay, you can hold that down. So I've got the sceg is installed now. I'm going to mix up some epoxy and some filler, and I'm going to put a little fillet along each edge of that, but then I'm going to call it a night. If you've enjoyed the video, I would appreciate a thumbs up, and we'll catch you on the next ones. Thank you.